Hello, it's Brian Whitten and ET Art. I have found cause for another video, yet another one. Listen, there are some important aspects we need to cover today in respect not only the motion of this body that we see near the sun, but whilst we're looking at that, have a look at the size of it. It is huge, absolutely huge. It's larger than the size of Earth, without a doubt. It is huge, and you would have a perception of any interference with that into our system would be having some rather dire effects to our own planet at this very point in time, like rather large major effect. I want to discuss that with you a little further. The other thing I want to discuss today, before going on any further, if you're 12 years old or younger, 13 or so, you probably want to go and get your parents or guardians to have a look at this video first. If you're 18 years old or older, you go and get your parents as well and watch it, because we're going to go through some rather astrological marvels in the next 6 months or so, or 8 months, driven by our ancestors. Okay, so you can go think ET or whatever, and they are us, essentially. Our ancestors return and manage Earth cycles around the sun. Not something that is not known. There is every leader in our world would know such a thing. When we look at the inserted image and look at what we're told of the pyramid, is it had a gold cap. And I've suggested to you that what we're taking off here when they come back is the cream of the crop. And then through the white races, we're seeing the removed patches from the white. The people that were in the races above the Mediterranean being filtered. You know, that they're going to take the worst away. Listen, before I go on, I do want to address directly all those people, those ones at the top end of town here. When I took this job on, which is obviously a job, I didn't expect that through our passage of time, of my understanding of what's going on, and the passage of time of our planet, that it gets pushed in and out between rings of rotation beyond Mars and all such things. It's been a lesson that I've learnt that I know you already know. Having said that, we are now at a point only 8 months or so away from a galactic experience of an unimaginable event. And as much as there may be people sitting out there thinking, you know, I'm making an excuse for your behaviour, but your behaviour is driven by the electromagnetics of our system. And I can tell you, I'm the last person on this planet that was probably expecting to give you, boys and girls, a behaviour for or an excuse for your behaviour. Because I'm telling you now, I've woken up many a day and wish you all dead. But then I wake up other days not knowing this, realising these people as children get raised in a way as to, you know, enforce that element anyway by their parents, because their parents have got the same problem, the virus. It's a switch or turning on within our geno, with, you know, and obviously not all of us, because like I said, there's no way in the world that as there were many white people that don't, right? But what we're talking about here is that took place, that an event, of an astrophysical event, caused that problem many, many, many millions of years ago. I will talk to you about a few things. I want to move on and urge you guys to understand just exactly that you've got at your fingertips the very answers. All of you have. Every one of you who has committed all these behaviours, every one of you has the ability now to step away from it, for shit's sake, and wake up, because there's no winner here. You guys do not win. You never ever have. And the whole process is here to ensure that we are all here. The whole thing is to ensure. And it's far more than humanity. I will discuss something with you later that I've since learned is the case. I do want to move on a little in respects on planetary motion issues and the rotation of Mars around the Sun, because that's something else we need to understand. The inserted picture that I show you, and when I want you to just remember the size of that body. It's a huge body. It's compared to the sun, it's way larger than Earth. In mass, its volume, its mass I don't know. In volume it's obviously bigger. In mass I have no idea of its actual weight. This would be a very good thing to see. I've said to you that that planet is going to be used as a body to knock across in front of the sun, to do a nudge, wink, wink, say no more sort of thing. I expect that that's actually still going to happen. And very much so for that reason, because that phrase comes from England. Okay? And the worst of that type of behaviour seems to stem from England. This is this satanic child, behaviour. And it is putrid, I'm not kidding. From what I have seen, I may have very well walked out of an event like that as a child, myself, grabbing my younger brother's hand. I remember such an event. I would expect it's probably got something to do with Fiona Barnett and something she attended in Bathurst. That's another story, I won't go into it, but once again, I do not understand the selection process of those that select, that come and say, well, give that guy this job, because obviously I'm not the only person on the earth that is being woken up at the moment. But I'm going to go on with what I said that was incorrect. And I said that that body near the sun was going to be used to provide 5 days of a ring of fire. And I was incorrect, because I've now assessed and understood that the movement and the thrust upwards of the planet in the end, it's got to be a lot longer than that, because we've done calculations. I'll show you why those calculations were wrong, but before moving away from this, I've told you before that this was going to be 5 weeks. I don't think that that's, or 5 days of Christmas, that this planet is going to be put in front of the sun to give us a full solar eclipse everywhere on the globe, because it's so big. And it's going to be on an inner ring of rotation that we've spoken of. I won't go over and over and over repeating all those things, because we are at a stage now where we need to learn pretty quickly. I believe what we're seeing here in this is it'll be put in front of the sun initially, but the period of time will be longer. I'll show you where I work out the calculation of time in very shortly. It's not a very difficult thing, but we're going to see, what we're going to see now is it move out from here to this extremity, but it won't be, it'll be 3 months. And I'll show you why it's going to be 3 months. It'll coincide with the 3 months of the use of water inside the planet, okay? And I'll show you why that's the case. But what I'm seeing here, this line drawn out here to the centre is saying that's how far we're going to move it from the centre. Right, so in other words, the sun will be like that, and then it'll move it towards us, so that'll be the middle month. So it'll be October, November, December, and like I said, selection process, middle of November is the 16th of November is my birthday. It gets weirder and weirder, but I've still got a job to do. So I'm doing my job here, and I don't see this, you could say, oh, it could be 5 months. I will show you why I think it's only 3, it'll be in the calculus. But that's what I'm seeing here. I'm thinking we're seeing from this line out, we're only seeing 3 dots on that line. This 5 months here is when we're talking about the moon's movement. Like I said, their things have 2 or 3 meanings within the one thing. It makes it a little bit difficult sometimes to understand exactly what they're saying. So that's where I'm seeing that, and that is backed up by the calculations of distance. We can work that out, I'll show you shortly, but that's what I would expect to see. So by mid-November we will have the ring of fire at its closest, and it will look like this thing's going to crash into Earth. That's why you need to talk about it. It doesn't matter whether you talk about it, because everybody's going to know. They'll take care and control of your media the way they take control of my camera there. I've had files, edited. I've had a lot of weird things happen. I know what they're going to do. And all these things that we see, I said to you in my last video that we're going to see everything we've got that goes bang, like every tanker, every warship, every plane, every one of those devices is just going to disappear and be left on Mars. And I'll come back to why that's the case. That's what's going to happen to all that stuff. It's just going to disappear. You've been told that by these disappearing squadrons of craft over down there in Central America when you're flying over, you know, the Gulf. It's not happening for no reason. It's happening to tell you what's going to happen. Anyway, we'll come back to this, and this is what we're going to see. This is why I say to you, I urge you, each and every one of you, the kings and queens of Europe, the leaders of our world, seriously guys, you've just been told by a person that's the last person on earth that wanted to give it to you an excuse for your behaviour and ability to see that, to see it happen. But that will only happen if you start telling the truth, because your time is running out. I have shown you this megalith in China. It's not long discovered actually. It's and it is a scale model, if you will, of the top of the Earth. It's actually telling you that if it actually flew up real fast, its last calculated speed is 60,000 miles an hour. It only does it for 4 minutes, but it's long enough. And the rotational speed from this line of longitude, from here, shifting all the way around there in the same 4 minutes, is an actual factor speed of 120,000 miles an hour. They're showing you what happens here. This much of the top of the globe would be left in space and just smash off. That's what they're showing us. That is not the only thing they are showing us though, because they are showing us in this movement up in the first 30 minutes, a minute for each step, the very same things that we are being shown in the Serapeum with the movement back of the axis. The very same speeds here. So what we're seeing in the megalith here is an actual fact of movement upwards here, and it's telling us in both these lines here, in this first 30 minutes and then this last 4 minutes, the total distance, the whole of the Earth is moved upwards, okay, in its motion towards the plane of the Sun. When we work that out, we are looking at, in this instance, half the globe, and in here, not quite half the globe. It's a little shy, but not much, so we'll take 1,000 off. If I calculate there 7,000 miles, which is what that is, you know, it's not hard to work out, the 7,000 miles in 34 minutes puts us some 7,000 miles that the planet's getting gripped up here. And it's pulling the planet up here, way off the planet's surface here, way outside of any orbiting little satellites you can stop to do the thing. And I have mentioned before about Elon Musk's satellites, whether or not they're really what they say they are, or whether they're something to do with trying to stop this actual effect of the Earth being plucked from space and hurled upwards, which is what this is about. That's why the megaliths and pyramids are all here. It's to do with this. It exists because our cycles are unnatural. The design of our system built it timed absolutely perfectly to do all the things it does, and our leaders know all such things as well. But in this motion here, and that's why I'm saying we can calculate this, our movement upwards on the plane of the Sun is easily calculated. Our plane of rotation is along in this way. This is the horizontal plane of the Sun. We're going around the Sun in an anti-clockwise direction, and this plane is the one that's been motioning upwards slowly. It goes at 66.6 miles a day. It's not difficult to work out either. They also know that. Where that actually is, you know, like I said, those dates are written within those parchments. I won't go back through that. We know the date is this Christmas. And it's the week of Christmas, Christmas Eve. It's the 24th of the 12th, 2020 at 3 AM in the morning, and it's the day before Christmas when the bang happens. That's not going to happen. That's why all these lessons are here. So, you know, the process of learning, what we're learning, is for us to understand what's happening in the solar system with these other bodies here, and why they're not affecting us, because we'll see that get in the way of the Sun, and you'll think, why didn't Earth move the way it should have? And it's because it is not on this horizontal plane. That's exactly what they'll show you, and you'll understand all the physicists and astrophysicists out there that a bloke that doesn't have any idea about what he's talking about it will be actually mirrored in the skies, and therefore you will understand a bloke that doesn't know what he's talking about explaining to you the theories of the devices, the megaliths, the pyramids, the things that have been left here to tell us such things. Well, then I have read the story correctly. And like I said, if you see white lines like this drawn on, I've said before, that's in the middle of the programmable rock video that we, you know, that's somebody helping me work something out. So why? I don't know. It's just the way it is. We just got to move on with it, you know. So that's how I look at it. So that's what I want to say, is that what we're seeing there is that movement up is 66.6 kilometres a day, and that is where we're getting the 3 months from. It calculates, it's exactly correct. One more thing I want to discuss from a point of view of the motion of Earth. We must compare it to Mars. We already told that Mars, we know that it has roughly a 24-hour day. We also know it stands straight, so it's safe to assume it's on the horizontal plane already, locked in and loaded, so to speak. However, we are told that going in an anti-clockwise direction around the Sun, it takes 1.8 years. Now 1.8 years is almost equal to the speed Earth does in the outer ring of rotation, which is 66,000 miles an hour out here. It's 33,000 miles an hour in this inner ring of rotation. Well, in the off-plane cycles here anyway, the off-plane cycle or on-plane cycle out here, it's flat stick. You know, and the calculated speed here is, you know, slightly faster again than what we're doing now. It's not a whole lot, but it is. Slightly quicker, it's not a whole lot different. We are going from a 12-month here to an 11.5 month going this way, and we go to an 11 month that way. We've calculated these before, I'm not going to go through those, but what I wanted to say to you that it's an impossibility, because Mars is going in the fast direction here. You can't live on it going the other way, and you can't live on it going, you know, this way, because it's going to lose the water. So we see the remnants, and I've said to you before, that's where all those ships will go. We've seen these. These are on. There's rusted boats up there. That's where all the ships of our former worlds have been like this. All the weapons, bang, crash, up on Mars. But it's an impossibility to live on Mars. It cannot hold water. We've been told that here. The only way it can hold water is if it's frozen. That's what I'm seeing here. So what I'm actually seeing, that the reality here is that that planet that we're, or body that we're seeing near the Sun, is going to put on the ring of rotation of Mars, and it will be Mars that becomes the moon of that planet. And we're going to see them build that planet and put it there and turn it into a world. I urge you all to understand that that's what the message we're going to see here. They're going to come in, it's going to be our ancestors. My God, how could you not want to see that happen? My God, you would have to do not want to see that happen. And the halls of power that you all perceive yourself to walk in, and the intelligence that you have, my God, and you don't want to see that? That's our ancestors coming to do this. My God, how could you be so stupid as not to want to tell the Earth and everybody on it that that's what's going down? My God, that is beyond stupid. That really is. That is absolutely pathetic. I did want to come back to this megalith in Saudi Arabia just for a second. This is in actual fact a megalith that's reflecting the time and hours a day you get in the middle cycle that we are just completing. Here we are seeing the daylight hours recorded looking south to the sunrise and sunset of winter. That is what you're seeing here. That's why I'm saying there is no civilization living in the middle of the cycle. It's impossible for a civilization to live like that. We can't even live with a civilization like ours without toilet rolls at the supermarket. It's an impossibility. I'm not saying there aren't tribal peoples here, because they're the only ones that could survive. The elders would appear to have been told to move north during this period of time in Australia. The glyphs that I've shown you at Carry-On seem to indicate an instruction for the natives, like the Aboriginal elders at the time. So I'm not saying that there was nobody on Earth here, but it certainly would not have been civilizations like ours. Not in no way, it would have been impossible. But tribal wanderers and people that could move, they would have probably been left here and probably been able to survive the option here. But then they probably were given the option here, because if we were looking at the cycle itself being the end of 2,000 years, before you hit this, before you hit this time here, this is really impossible here. I just wanted to show you that, but I wanted to show you that there's a doorway here that you can get into. There are so many that you can't. They're the same thing, but they're solid rock. And I realised, and I said to somebody the other day, he just, you know, we've got him. Like I said, when you start saying that all these bombs have dropped on this very image, it's pretty hard to argue the point, and it's very confronting. Was it confronting for me to work it out as it was for me to tell somebody else and for them to understand? Especially when you realise that how many untruths we've been told and for how long. You know, it's sad. But there, you'll see the doorways where you can't get into them there. That's Ugalot. It's like talking to a brick wall. And I guess they've told us in their way, they've made their megaliths here and have doorway after doorway after doorway closed, that you don't listen. Seriously, you've just got to understand that what you're walking away from is the answer to everything that explains your behaviour, that explains the earth, that explains our ancestry, of all of us, every race. Mr. Morrison, I'll address you directly here. You're the Prime Minister of our country here, sir. I've been in contact with you directly by email for over 12 months. Your time, sir, well, I'll give you my theory, okay? This inserted image was the first comet to hit our planet 6,000 years ago. That was the reason the Earth was tilted. That is the first one. It lands right here. Okay, it didn't really have any real effect from a perspective of moving the planet. It is only 16 miles wide. We've spoken of it before. It is sort of on the trajectory heading down here towards Canberra. We've spoken of that before. I'm just trying to get you to make the right decision, because I can tell you now that I'm absolutely certain that silence in this case is not going to be a particularly good thing. And I would read that as having been the first thing last time. That will be the first. You will be the first example, sir. So I'm trying to get you to do the right thing. And like I said, it's driven mostly because now I have an understanding of why you have protected what it is. But you are the leader of the country, and you've got to step up, mate. Otherwise, I would expect you're going to be made an example of here. Having said that, I'm going to move on. There are many, many men and women in the halls of power, and quite the moment you're actually supposed to be very smart people, and I expect that all of you are. You know, you're probably pretty cluey people and know many things. At the moment, we've got a young fella, not as young as he used to be, he's 60, sat in a house up here for quite some time because I was not prepared to take on a girlfriend, because I expected they too would have been killed. So I didn't, I decided to be somewhat secluded to a degree, and that isn't me at all, so I've sort of decided that was a good thing to do. I wanted to cross into yet again another perception and understanding of the message we've been left, which is extremely important. By far, almost the most important message we could be left. I want to talk to you, if I can, about a perception of a couple of boys living here on the New South Wales coast, where I grew up, surfing and living on the Central Coast here, right? These two boys here lived here, and they lived just across the road from each other. So they visited each other regularly. It was a very, very lovely childhood. They were mates, grew up together. went to school, primary school together, come high school. One of them was put into a private school, which was just the other side of town. So their afternoon things didn't quite happen the way they used to. They didn't grow apart that they weren't friends, but they sort of started to spread a little bit further. As time went by, then they went from high school into sort of slightly different realms. One of them had a private education. Wasn't to say that he was smarter, he just had a private education. Took him a little bit slightly different track away from the area that they grew up in. And then hence a relationship, friendship, didn't wane. Their friendship was still as strong as it ever was, but the man with private education got given an opportunity. And his opportunity was in the mining industry, because Australia, as we all know, was mineral rich, and he was offered a job. Our country is a perfect situation to analyse further, and like I said, go into a realm of understanding that I'm not qualified to do, and this is only just me saying to you a theory. But anyway, he gets a job and he goes to Western Australia in the mining industry, and he gets paid very, very handsomely, whereas the mate he left back here on the east coast of New South Wales and Central Coast, he's still living there, he's still happy. You know, he's married and he's got children. His money, income is not quite as much as the mining executive now that's living over here in Western Australia. And this guy's got a boat, yep, here's his boat. The guy on the west coast who's a mining executive is still good friends. They still communicate with each other regularly, but the communication is now by communications, high-speed telephone, blah, blah, blah. But they're not actually meeting anybody here. They don't meet anywhere near as much in their latter life as they did at the start. Their friendship wanes to a degree, but they are still good friends. This bloke over here, his boat looks like this. His house looks like this. He has much more money. His surrounds are far, far, far exceeding his friends. His technology even that he's using is far beyond his friends. The money he has allowed him to have such technology. And his beck and call are things that this man couldn't even possibly imagine having. I want you to put this analogy here, if you would, across the problem we're told we have. And that was a situation where a planet in our solar system has been hit with a beam of whatever from wherever. That would appear to be the case, and that it's hit the north or the top of one planet, of which most of us European races were all on. It affected all of us differently, without doubt. Without doubt, I'll cover that in a little more as to why that is the case. But I want you to understand now, I want you to replace this and the full width of Australia and the story that we've just told with a galaxy, our galaxy. And instead of it being a span of a lifetime, but the span of many, many, many lifetimes, for a million years, it wouldn't be that the people here, being Earth now, and the ancestors that left us long, long, long ago, because of a realm that they've moved in from a geophysical sense and an astrophysical sense, and the rays of rotation of a star, as we're taught through the cycles of Earth around the sun here, the varying changes of magnetic field, creating totally different behaviour just in with the people on our planet with the problem. Right? So we're being told in the cycles that this problem switches off, but we're also being told all these other things. So in actual fact, if we look at this, we could actually say that a time that people left Earth and enter another realm of another star, that the very intellect that they left with could jump ahead so quickly and leave us behind. And there would be a situation where you'd say, well, hang on a minute, is it wise to bring them back anymore? You know, like the friendship wanes, because this is the reality here. The friendship wanes here. This guy says, oh, well, I don't really want to bring him back anymore because he's sort of down there. It's an instinctual thing here. he doesn't want to belittle his friend, because when he rings back now, he realises, I pulled up in a Rolls Royce and a Mercedes Benz, and I don't want to make him feel belittled. So in essence, the conversation gets cut in half, just like Australia is going to be. Do you see what I mean? In the separation of the communication here, we are seeing the very thing that happened in our universe, or our part of our galaxy, our part of the galaxy. Okay, so what I'm saying is that we're actually seeing this happen, and that this has happened and people have left this planet with a very, very smart still, but that they've gone somewhere else and got way smarter real quick. And that's possibly what's happened, because I'm seeing Earth here be very, 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 very important. It is the most, and I think this is where we're seeing, that is where we are told it is us. And that our problem here, how are you going to clear this from the system? And this is the other reason why I wanted to look at this, because the other time factor here, it's a long time to get to Western Australia. If you want to drive there, it's a long time. It's 5,000 kilometres across Australia. It's a long way. So you've got a time factor when you go there to visit the person. Once again, time. And this is what I'm saying to you about what was the resolution of the problem. It wasn't just the cycle of Earth and the way it's put around the sun. You've gotten to a point where this guy here is really, really rich. And this guy here is still going pretty good, you know. This guy over here has given this guy business contacts and whatnot, so that he is bringing him further up in society, just as we would if in actual fact we were talking beyond the boundaries of our planet. I want you to ponder now that the speed and haste at which we've learnt things in our own technology within our own world, where we were 100 years ago and where we are now. Another 40 years from now, in 2060, is they invent a time machine, so they can actually go back and forward between Western Australia and the New South Wales coast here in an instant. Now, think of the problem we've just told you about that we've got beyond that time limit, and going beyond now, making this our galaxy, not Australia. We can go across the galaxy now, like that, in an instant, from one part of the galaxy to another, backwards and forwards in time. That is a result of travel like that. You cannot do it any other way. Obviously it's done very, very accurately to put you where you started. But in reality, I now want you to understand the concept of the release of that type of situation. We are now travelling backwards and forwards in time with human nature being the way it was. It would be impossible for this behaviour that they didn't know about for 300 years, which is what they've told us in the pyramid. The pyramid and the Serapeum tell us that the manifestation, this electrical interference, or the initial impact, or the initial infection, was a 300-year process. 300 years with time travel involved. How do you go and how do you go about stopping it? What they've actually had to do, I would expect, come back in time. It's the only way. There is no other method. If you ponder and think about that process, there is no other method to come back to the very planet, having worked out where it came from, and they would have those skills. They would be able to go back in time to find out when it actually happened. They would actually have to get the people off the planet at the very instant before it happened. And that would be where their stock came from. And what I'm saying to you then is, what I'm saying, they couldn't have afforded to breed beyond Earth. They couldn't have. It's impossible, because they couldn't have possibly cleared the situation. I think that that's what we're being told in the cycles of Earth and the extraction of people off it, I would believe that what we're being shown here is that's what our ancestors, all of them, everywhere in that 300-year period in our part of the universe, that's how bad it was. That they actually had to stop in a given part of space where they knew they had travelled in that time and popped the whole lot of us, and every one of those other civilizations that came from Earth would have to have stopped breeding. Every one of them. And that is why I'm saying to you people, all of us really, from that perspective, every one of our ancestors from this particular point, like I said, it's like we all came, not necessarily all came from Earth, but where the ones that had come from Earth from the many, many millions of years had to all stop breeding. They would have had to have, because it would have been the only way. So their way and means of reproduction is in actual fact us. We go back there, or they use, and that's why we're seeing, as we do, their inception. And I'll be honest with you, if I looked at some of the images I've seen on rocks, and I have put a video up already about it, that it does seem to be that they've even told myself that the same things happen. I have a friend of mine who my last partner actually, was quite some time back, and once again, this is why, that might be why I got the job as well, because I had this other thing I was doing was separate from this, but it was still going to risk a partner's life if I had one. So I didn't have a partner. I just thought it was just, and that's funny because that's part of the deal of what they've done. But they've done it everywhere, every one of them, everywhere, would have had to have stopped having, or at least reproducing by natural forces, or because they couldn't have risked. And then you'd say, well, how far does this go? How far on does the sequence go? That's what I mean. It's impossible to understand how far, and they wouldn't even know themselves possibly. Because in the 300 years, how would they have known where everybody went? So that's why I believe we're seeing the sequence. But mostly I wanted to say to all of the people that I've just addressed here, understand what our ancestors have given up. I wanted to come back to the cycle here for a minute, just to have a discussion with you. Some of the things are pretty obvious here, that we're actually getting far more cycles here built. We are now, we know we can't live on Mars. It goes in 1.8 years, round almost twice to Earth. This speed through space of the planet itself cannot hold water. That's why that big one that we see near the sun, this inserted image, will be skipped across here next year and placed on the ring of rotation of Mars, and then Mars will be the moon of that planet. It's huge, and it needs to be. The mass needs to be bigger to go slower. Right? It rotates at the right angle, but that is the problem. We go the other way, the mass is being moved through space. It's the same with Mars, the size it is. It won't go any slower that way than this way in the speed of the mass through space. So you can't live on Mars, but it is without doubt we are seeing multiple, way more cycles here, especially now when you bring Mars back in here, far more cycles than would suit just the people that were in our solar system at the time. That's what I'm saying. I said to you before that they would have had to cut down the breeding process somewhere. I'll be honest, we were looking at a 300-year lead time before it actually manifested itself, or before they knew it. 300 years they'd travel the other side of the galaxy. We were talking about a really modern race, and by the design here would indicate to me that the very root of many of the life forms in our galaxy are from actually Earth, from this system. And that's why they had to come back and close, not the system down, they closed the galaxy down. The whole galaxy. We are being used here to produce, for all of our offspring, for over the many millions of years before this actually happened. Like I said, we are being used in that respect to breed, because they couldn't breed anymore. They couldn't afford to, because if they had afforded and bred the way they normally did, the way we do, there was no way of not passing it on. The only way to stop a spread across a galaxy the one and the type that we're talking of, would only ever have been resolved by the closing of the galaxy itself. So in other words, everybody else outside of the ones they pulled off Earth here, when they've gone back to the very day that it happened and taken the people off, that is the good seed. It was the only way they could get it. And from that point forward, that seed has been used to spore all of the other races beyond our solar system. They have had to give up a hell of a lot to give us the right to breed. We do not advance in our life. We are as we were 30 to 40 million years ago. I wanted to show you, if I could, just these swirls on these plates, and we've shown you these before, that they represent the inner and outer ring here, and the cycle is, in actual fact, the rotation of Earth on its axis has changed on its way back from the outer ring here. That's why we're seeing these little swirls in opposite directions. Between each of these cycles here, there is a minimum of 88,000 years, because that is actually performed on the way back in from the outer ring, and we know we spend 44,000 years in here and 44 out here, 88,000 years between each one of these swirls. But we haven't just got that, and if you add all these up here, I was saying, well, roughly 30 million years. But that was before I realised we have another plate. This one with the cycles in the middle here, where the moon is moved out, we've discussed, this is when we come up in a very narrow portion of the horizontal plane. The other cycle that does not use the moon, like this, in and out, is another cycle. So I mean, there's way more cycles here than we need. So we're being generated here. This once again, like I said, we see the swirls here. The same thing again, it's another plate, it's another cycle. So they're going to do, you know, the other cycle, which is 88,000 years, is only, they have to turn the Earth around and go back the opposite direction, right? So they're creating all of the things in the opposite direction and then come back and do the two of these. So we're talking in excess of 60 million years, and that's at 44,000 or 88,000 for each one of these swirls. So in reality here we're talking, you know, 88,000. These can be far longer because they are showing 44,000 years sectors on the inner ring, 48,000, 65,000. So at the absolute minimum we're looking at 60 million years. One further thing I want to discuss before I finish up. The thing we look at here is Ricart's structure, or the Eye of the Sahara it's called, or the Eye of Africa. It's called a couple of things, but in actual fact it is in Central Western Africa. I've said to you before, and have put this up, that it was to do with this high-speed rotation of Earth. It's 120,000 miles an hour. And in fact, what you ever chucked a wet tennis ball along the road, the water flies off at the part that's going the fastest. That's essentially what happens. Our oceans, at those sort of speeds, just get hurled off into space, and they just get fried. They don't come back. The gravitational force of the Earth does not pull water back from the ocean. It just, I mean, from space, it just goes. That's what we're seeing here, but I believe we're also seeing something else. We're actually seeing here a representation of the galaxy as well. In other words, the spread was that bad. It's gone right across the galaxy. 400 years or 500 years, or the 300 years that it took to manifest the virus, or at least come to the conclusion and understanding that it was there. By this stage it spread right across our galaxy, and like I said, that's why I believe we're seeing not just the reason we're seeing so many different cycles, but we go through a process of cleansing here, and we're moved away to other worlds in different groups at different times. That is what I'm seeing, we're seeing. But there, as opposed to this inserted image where we're seeing the water get pulled to one pole because the mass accelerates, which is what this Egyptian relic is about. Not just that, it's also telling us Atlantis is installed around the equator to hold the tidal waves or stop tsunamis. That's what it is. That's exactly why it's going to be put around the equator, as well as the electrical requirements from a point of view of shielding us from this very, very electromagnetic field that will be on our equator. But certainly I would see that that is a situation. It's told us that it went right across the galaxy, but it didn't go any further. Why? Because the next galaxy whether we were transcending beyond it or not, that the skills we had within our solar system at the time did not allow that to happen there and back in the 300 years. It's impossible. It would have been a situation where they said, well, it's impossible to have got that far in that time. So it was just our galaxy that got pulled down. Every race of beings that had come from the human being on this planet stopped breeding. They had to, because it's the only way. It would have been the only way. And then you could ask, well, how long does the process need to stay in place for? Exactly right. They wouldn't know. How long is a piece of string? You'll have to get to the end of the sequence where you've got no shit coming out the other end. You know, excuse the phrase, but that's a reality. That's what a filter system does. It gets the shit out of a system. The shit out of our system, there's the people in our world that run it. And I can assure you, they're going to get the shit out of this system very, very quickly, which is why I made this video. Yet again, trying to get these people at the top with their sense of I am God attitude that they have, because they're on a bloody income and sitting there judging the government. Will be. These boys are going to put you in your place very, very shortly. So I come back to our very small megalith. Like I said, this thing's only a couple of metres wide, this, and it is on the very same line as the event, this event here. That's the one that's tilted our globe, and the purpose and reason all this is here. This is talking about the 3,000 year cycle that is used to go to the outer ring. It's not always there, but it is at times, and I think it asks you, it says, why am I there and why am I not there? Which is why I've come back and said, well, Mars, it's just going too fast through space to be used. That big body up there that we're going to see near the sun, used temporarily, as I've already explained, will be put into place. But here what I see when I look at this and say, okay, well, we're moving out. So they're talking about humans here leaving the solar system, and what I would expect, we're seeing 7 other worlds here, which will also explain why we're getting the multiple, you know, the multiple sequences. It cannot exist in our solar system. We've only lost 2 planets. We've got sequences all over the show here. And I think this is why we're seeing it. We're actually seeing here that there are 7 other worlds that we get moved to beyond our solar system in a quadrant of space where we're allowed, but our ability to travel or go beyond there will not happen, right? Because what happens, the technology that will get to this point, you will never have the ability to get from there to another place in the time it takes for that to fall away, you know, our population to fall off, because I think that's what's happening there. And I would think that maybe this, when we get to these worlds, when it's been filtered out of us, well, these are the worlds where we supply, and a full understanding of why we're doing it. So it's not like it would be something that would be not done. We would be, by this stage, very, very well an understanding of exactly why the sequence is here, and that how many other people have had to actually just stop. I wouldn't say they stopped having sex, I'm just saying they certainly would have had to take precautions, and probably, I'll be honest with you, with magnetic, not with, you know, an operation I would expect. So in other words, they would have made it so the male couldn't produce sperm. It was the only way they could do such a thing, because you still need the females to be able to breed when the eggs are produced from these planets here, to spread back out again into these systems, to let all the other races keep, you know, doing what we're doing, which is increasing their population and being able to live onwards. Otherwise they'd all die out, every one of them. That's what the sequence is. Our whole planet here has been used to supply every other being that's ever evolved on Earth, and been doing it this in excess of what would be 60 million years. I urge you, once again, the Prime Minister and all these people, understand what other people, these people that are coming here, have given up, because I can tell you, I can understand why they get so pissed. I won't talk for them and tell you your requirements from a point of view of courage, because at this point you have not showed any. None of you. And I can tell you, I've had to show plenty to kick off and start what I had to originally, as did my 2 boys. You have not. That is a very, very big thing. I would expect, like I said, the decisions on your lives are in your hands, but they won't be for much longer. That is one thing I'm certain of. Your lives at this point are in your hands. Come and see this all happen, for come and see this happen. Pack the bloody tools away, expose the whole lot, and shut the bloody thing down, or you're going to be gone, man, and I'm not kidding. These people here that do this, spin our planet out beyond Mars and back and do all such wondrous things. They're our ancestors. They do all this sort of stuff here. You guys are that much worried about what pair of shoes you've got on, what car I drive. It's inhuman. Your behaviour is inhuman. Killing little babies is inhuman. You are sick. Understand it. And shut the bloody thing down, because I'm telling you, they shut it down. And the doors that you leave when you leave this world, they are saying with all their skills, there are still 3 doors when you leave the realm of reality and the physical world we're in. There are 3 doors that you take. It's written behind the 3 doors of the Last Supper. Not that I'm a religious person, but I can tell you now, they left that there, and they're talking about the 3 doors when you go out of this real world here. And I can tell you that is a permanent thing, and they know full well it exists. And if you're on the wrong door there, it's an eternity. It is eternity. Make no mistake. Get yourselves heading to another door, because the decision on what door you're going is going to be made before June, or before the end of June. It'll be made by the 30th of June. And the 1st of the 7th is when they're coming out to install Atlantis, and that's what's going to happen. Your lives are in your hands. Leaders, I'll leave you with that thought. This is Brian Whitten, and eat out for everybody else, Have a lovely day, and enjoy what we are going to learn in the coming months. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.